Please welcome the Honorable John Kerry, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuning in from. And welcome back to President Biden's Leaders Summit on Climate. We thank you to all of you who joined us yesterday and to all who participated on panels. Yesterday, we heard from heads of state, financial leaders from public and private sector, from ministers all across governments, and public servants at every level of society. The amount of action and commitments that we heard yesterday was frankly inspiring. I think it's fair to say there is a new beginning as the world is moving towards the actions necessary to keep 1.5 degrees as the limit on the warming of the planet. Governments and markets, we learned yesterday, are really tuning into the urgency. But more than that, they're recognizing the remarkable opportunity, the economic opportunity that we have here. And that's what today is about. The world's largest market in history is opening before our own eyes right now. And it's going to create millions of high-quality, good-paying jobs around the world, especially in countries that seize this agenda. Today is going to be about that vision. We're going to hear from governments, entrepreneurs, community and labor leaders about how they see the future. But before we dive in, I'd like to share with you a quick summary of discussions that we had on the margins of the summit. We had so many countries obviously wanted to be able to participate, but running a virtual summit encompassing 12 time zones is difficult, and it's clearly a challenge just to include the numbers that have been included directly in the summit itself. So we listened to, in two listening sessions, I heard from representatives of 63 countries at the ministerial level. We heard from oil-rich countries, biodiversity-rich countries, and from small islands and landlocked countries who face particular challenges. We had countries from every conceivable region of the world take part in these listening sessions. The Balkans, Scandinavia, Central Asia, the Middle East, South Asia, South America, West Africa, the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, from Armenia to Zambia, literally. I left those roundtables, frankly, feeling excited, encouraged. On the one hand, many of the countries, as you can imagine, these are countries that produce less fractions of 1% of the emissions, but they are the greatest impacted by the effects of climate. And many of those countries express concern about the inadequacy of global action to date to meet the goals of Paris. Many noted that mitigation thus far has not been sufficient to keep us on track to hold on to a safe temperature. Many countries, including the most vulnerable, are already experiencing unprecedented impacts, floods, hurricanes, drought, fires, and more. And many, which was very encouraging, had extremely bold plans of their own to confront these challenges, but they lacked the capacity. They lack the resources to be able to implement those plans. There is polite but obvious frustration that was manifested by many who have contributed so little to the crisis, but who have to deal with so much of the consequences. And at the same time, participants enthusiastically reported, one after the other, of the very significant and exciting measures that they're taking, efforts they're individually undertaking to tackle the climate crisis, even though, because of the fractions they represent, their best efforts are turned towards adaptation and resilience, because they can have a minimal impact on the mitigation, yet they are still engaged in mitigation. And I think we should all, the bigger nations, be inspired by their efforts. Many countries emphasized the critical role of COP26 in Glasgow. the critical role in keeping 1.5 degrees Celsius as the limit of the warming that we face. And because we know that we are already at 1.2 degrees, we have a very small margin to play with. Many of these countries reported that they have submitted or are working on enhanced NDCs. And I think every larger nation should be inspired by that. And many have adopted net zero goals. It was particularly interesting to hear how they are dealing with heavy industry, something we have not heard a lot about, but which is one of the toughest areas for mitigation. Many participants highlighted their national adaptation efforts, such as early warning systems, rapid response efforts, flood protection plans. But I'm sure as you hear me saying those things right now, everyone will say to themselves, is that really what they're reduced to? An early warning system, a flood protection, a response effort? Many of them are coordinating regionally to pursue shared interests. And many echoed President Biden's themes that action on climate is an opportunity for job creation, and that it is important to leave behind communities that are dependent on fossil fuels. Now, we have heard from a carbon-negative countries that have successfully decoupled economic growth from carbon emissions. We heard from countries with extensive forest cover that offer themselves up with a nature-based solution. We heard from leaders in carbon storage, from countries issuing green bonds, and countries focusing on gender-responsive approaches and the participation of indigenous communities. And it should be inspiring to the major economies that many of these countries are all of them embracing passionately climate action, and they contribute far less than 1%, as I said a few minutes ago. Grenada reminded us that words are not enough, that the rule book being finished in Glasgow is not enough, that what is critical is the actions, the outcomes, particularly of the largest emitters in the world. We, all of us in the last day and a half, and now today, we'll be able to focus on real solutions to this challenge. And I'd close by saying that what came out of these conversations with the 63 nations not able to take part in this part of the summit was that they hear the language from leaders about an existential threat. And indeed, for many people on the planet today, the climate crisis is an existential threat. But they, like the young woman who spoke yesterday, know that we are not yet behaving as if it is an existential threat. That is the challenge of today. And the message that we hope leaps out from today's panels is that no one is being asked for a sacrifice. This is an opportunity for better health, for great jobs, with extraordinary opportunities of the future to grow our economies, and to provide for much greater security for our nations. The roundtables contributed significantly to this sense of urgency. And it is a sense of urgency that really mandates that we raise our ambition as we head to Glasgow. Great pleasure now of introducing my friend Michael Bloomberg. During his career of private sector innovation and his public service as mayor of New York City and as a philanthropist, Mike recognized early on that tackling the climate crisis was going to require action from every level of society, from town halls to governor houses, C-suites to mom and pop shops. And when the previous administration withdrew the United States from the Paris Agreement and retreated from global leadership, Mike Bloomberg leaned in. He founded America's Pledge and helped launch a national movement to rally American cities, states, businesses, universities, and tribal councils to declare that we in the United States, that we are still in the Paris Agreement and climate action. Now in his role as a UN Special Envoy on Climate Ambition and Solutions, Mike uses that experience to help all of us try to move the world to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank President Biden and his administration for bringing us all together. Let me also thank the national leaders taking part, including everyone who came to the summit armed with ambitious new goals for cutting emissions. The simple fact is, we can't wait for COP26 to take action. That's why this gathering is so important. We have a chance, right here today, to demonstrate what strong leadership really looks like. Yes, it's about setting ambitious goals, but it's also about bringing everyone from every part of the world together and working as a team to meet them, not just in government, but in the private sector too. Now, I want to emphasize something that I hear all the time from mayors and from CEOs too. They say, we're ready to do more. We want to do more, but we need more help. Sometimes they need more funding, sometimes they need more authority, and sometimes they need regulatory changes. You won't always agree with them, of course, but I urge you to listen to them, because if you look at the data, cities and businesses hold the key to defeating climate change. They are responsible for the vast majority of emissions, so helping them and incentivizing them to take action really is critical. The more action they take, the faster we can make progress. At Bloomberg Philanthropies, we've been working to help cities raise their ambitions and help spread solutions that work around the world. And our company has been working to help the market move more capital to green projects in every global region by bringing greater transparency to climate risks and opportunities. The Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures sets standards that help companies manage risks and that empower investors to direct more capital to companies that are leading the way. We can't beat climate change without a historic amount of new investment, and that will only happen if governments, investors, and business leaders have the information they need to make smart decisions. Working with partners, Bloomberg Philanthropies has also helped retire over 60% of all coal-fired power plants in the U.S., and half of the EU's coal plants too. Coal plants are the single biggest contributor to climate change, and they spew toxic, deadly pollution into the air. The good news is, clean energy is increasingly cheaper than coal in much of the world. That's one reason why more cities, states, and businesses are committing to reach net zero emissions, including our company, which is on track to reach net zero by 2025. There's a lot of good work happening in both the public and private sectors, just not enough. We have to do more, faster, to cut emissions. And by acting boldly and urgently, we can build a lot of momentum going into COP26 this November. We're all in this together, so thank you for coming together for this summit. All the best.
Thank you, Mike. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Brenda Mallory, who is the new chair of the Council on Environmental Quality. Brenda has dedicated her career to using the law to fight for environmental justice and legal reform inside and outside of government. And we're all delighted, as the president is, that she is part of his team.
Thank you, Secretary. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be part of the discussion on ensuring that all communities and workers benefit from our actions to address climate change. President Biden's approach to environmental justice is guided by a couple of core beliefs. First, that every single person has a fundamental right to drink clean water and breathe clean air. And second, that for too many people, we have failed to deliver those protections. This is true in the United States, but we know that it is also true in many other parts of the world. Correcting these historic wrongs is not going to be easy, and it requires a long-term commitment. But acknowledging a need for change is a critical first step. I was confirmed by the United States Senate just last week as the newest chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, but I've immediately gotten to work joining the rest of the President's team that has made environmental justice an everyday focus over the 3 months since his inauguration. There are 3 ways I'm going to be working every day to help the President achieve his environmental justice goals.